Hello there. It is Friday, November 14th, 2025, and it's 8:53 a.m. And I've been looking forward to this clip. Yesterday was an interesting day, and I have found that, when I have off time or downtime like this, it's kind of interesting because my desire to record kind of defaults to the morning, rather than at the end of the day. As I've mentioned many times, I've been making podcast clips for what it's worth. Not that that distinguishes me in any significant way from anyone else, but I do have a record from, the last 10 plus years of my life of where I was at various times, what was going on, what I was thinking about, what I was feeling, people around me, things around me, places I found myself in, and that's invaluable. I really, really love that and appreciate that. That was certainly an investment in my future self that I didn't even realize would have such an impact, especially now with things like AI. So, I did also want to mention, in case you just heard that horn, that it's funny, the bathroom at this Airbnb is literally, it faces a gas station, but there is no distance whatsoever between this gas station and this apartment. There is like a fence that hugs the actual wall of the house that has a few no trespassing signs on it. But I could definitely high five someone who was filling their tank up if they wanted to, slide me some skin before they went inside to get some zen. Slide me some skin before you get some zen. I never heard that before. That should be a thing, my dude. That's cool. But yeah, let's see. Well, I've kind of set myself up for a certain kind of day. First of all, I went to bed last night. I was in bed at like 8:30. I didn't really do anything physical yesterday. I mean, I went for a 4.5 mile walk, which, for me, that feels just like bare minimum maintenance for movement, Like I certainly don't like to be inside, a structure for an entire day, such as this Airbnb, without some sort of poking my head out for air. And thankfully, I also usually will set myself up so that I have to go out, because, I really enjoy being in places like this because it allows me to have the ability to cook, which, again, is like a hugely enjoyable thing for me to do. I make simple meals that taste delicious. I just ate 9 eggs and a peanut butter wrap that were exquisite. But I don't keep like a lot of material to make any of those things in the Airbnb. Like I strategically will only get something that I will use on the day. The only thing that I might double up on is eggs, because I don't want to go out in the morning if I don't have to. I like to come home at the end of the day, have everything that I wanted to do done, and then be able to cook, and then kind of, sail into that sweet yonder, my dude. But yeah, I went to bed at 8:30. I woke up at about 6:40. You can do the math, because I can't. But it was great. Like, I feel like I really caught up on sleep last night. I did wake up at around 2 a.m. I was having a weird dream, which this is a list note, because I was like, well, this is even stranger now. So I had this dream last night that I was driving a van, like a really old, like Chrysler, like a Plymouth van, like not a Town and Country, which I have a lot of familiarity with because that was sort of my family's bread and butter. Town and Country's got to be your bread and butter. But like a Plymouth, so a little bit smaller. I don't really know what the hierarchy is in terms of like which vehicle is like a quote unquote better or larger vehicle. But my impression of this vehicle was that it was not on the top tier. It was maybe a little smaller, fewer windows, maybe had like a 6-seat capacity. I don't even know. But I was driving this van, and it belonged in this dream to a family. And it was terrifying. Like, the brakes were really bad. Like, I was struggling really, really hard just to make the thing stop. Like, it wasn't about driving fast or anything. It was just like it would not stop. in my mind's eye and memory, which I wouldn't remember this at all if I hadn't made a note of it. Because when I woke up at 2 to go to the bathroom, I kind of woke up out of that dream. And I was grateful because I was like, man, that dream sucked. Like, driving that van was terrifying. It didn't really remind me of my own van, my, van life van, which, by the way, if you're interested, there are playlists to all of my van life chronicles and other hiking things and podcasts from when I was in my 20s and studying abroad in Japan. All that stuff is on YouTube. If you look up Akon Theta, which originally stood for Allie and Kenneth on the Appalachian Trail, so that's AKONTHEATA. Well, maybe not that last day, but whatever. If you're interested, that's enough for you to find out. If you're not, then I'm not going to go over it twice. So yeah, that I had a van for a little while, and it had 2 drum brakes and 2 disc brakes, and it was a pretty. I mean, I never encountered any actual issues with it, but certainly I had the thought many times driving cross country. I was just like, man, this thing could be a death trap for a variety of different reasons. Not the least of which was, the little propane tank that we had in the back, a 1-gallon propane tank, It was a really cool van. Like, if I had to choose, which I did, it's certainly one that I'm glad that I did choose because, it wasn't a ProMaster. It wasn't what is that? The Ford Transit, and it certainly wasn't what's the Mercedes one? What's that van? The Sprinter van. It was a old, 1992 or 1993 Dodge B250 that had been lovingly converted into a livable space with a canopy and everything. The guy who made it, he was a climber, I guess you'd call him. And so, going to a rock face and then camping out for a few days while you climb was how he used that vehicle. And he certainly kind of had that aesthetic. There were a bunch of carabiners all over the place, and just thoughtful touches. It felt rustic, a rustic feeling van. Kind of felt like this Airbnb, but a little bit more character. Just super small, nothing more than you needed, and probably less than that. And then, it was a way to move. I really, really didn't like van life, for the record. I found personally that, it was the least inspiring form of transportation I have ever employed for me to go places. Again, I like being in motion, but there was really nothing particularly special about doing that through driving for me. And of course, I am very biased, and this is all my opinion. I know that people probably certainly can derive meaningful experiences through traveling in a van. I know people personally who have, but for me, if I'm reporting my own experience, which is unassailable to critique, I did not like it. It was something, there was no exercise involved. I found that I spent more money than I would have ever if I was walking or biking, with gas and food and stuff like that. And obviously just the general maintenance of the van. I had a spreadsheet of all of the work that I had done to the van, and I think I put about $8,000 worth of maintenance and upgrades and stuff like that over the course of I don't even think I had it for 6 months. Would that be correct? Well, certainly less than a year. I know for sure less than a year. And it was just a money pit. It was an old van. It had some terrible and terrifying mechanical breakdowns. And, it was kind of really annoying because, when I first got the van, I was with this girl named Allie. Not just this girl, but that Allie was my girlfriend at the time. And we had driven to Pennsylvania from Oregon, where we bought the van. And, first thing I wanted to do, just from a mechanical standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, is I need to take this thing to a shop. And, I want them to go do a very thorough diagnostic of anything that they find that would be something that we want to replace or repair while we're here, because we're about to be doing who even knows what. and I don't want to be stuck somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, which did happen anyway a couple of times, and then have something go wrong that we could have addressed proactively. And so at that time, I think it was like, I don't know, spent like close to $2,000 for them to do this diagnostic thing and to repair a couple of things. And most notably, they replaced the wheel bearings of the front two wheels, which, as I came to find, is not something that often has to be done for vehicles. I mean, it is something, it's a part that does wear for sure. But the mechanic who installed the new wheel bearings did something wrong. And that's not hard to imagine, as a bicyclist, pressing bearings into a thing that rotates is a part of this pursuit as well, from the headset to the bottom bracket and almost nowhere else in between. You do have to press things into, basically, they just fit through friction, and then if they're properly set, you're good. But if you don't properly set a bearing and there's a little bit of a deviation of its flushness with the receptacle that it went into, you're going to cause accelerated wear. And so both wheel bearings ended up going out at separate times and in pretty dramatic fashion. I don't know if you've ever driven a vehicle that is actively destroying its own wheel bearing, but it's terrifying. And I guess it kind of ties into my dream, because that was kind of the feeling. It was like driving the van, if you applied the brakes, because, the wheel was no longer in the defined system that would keep it so that all of the parts were aligned with all the other parts, like the caliper of the brakes that would squish into the disc, they were very, very ineffective. And I was so upset. We'd pulled over to a safe place to be able to get this van off the road, and we had to crawl to a shop, and I had to have Allie drive, because I was like, I just can't do this. I feel like it's going to crash. I don't think that it actually will, but I just I'm so upset by this that I just got out of the van and I walked next to her as she drove the van the rest of the way to the shop. And, when we got to the shop, the guy was like, man, if you guys had gone any farther on this, you would have just been riding on the actual axle of the wheel without any kind of bearing to spread that load, and probably would have just destroyed the wheel. The whole mechanism, it just would have collapsed in on itself, and that would have been a huge repair. That would have been very difficult as well, because this kind of a van, there's not a huge market for the parts and stuff like that. Decaf green tea, dude. This is the life. So yeah, that was a horror story, and it's just the stakes are so much lower on a bike. Yeah, you can have a catastrophic failure, something can really go wrong, but the slower speed and the less weight, it's just it's a lot more recoverable, and it just doesn't feel like such an inconvenience. When your car doesn't work, it's it's a huge system that has failed, and it could take a long time to repair, and it could be very expensive. Whereas with the bike, the worst thing I've had happen on this trip was having to replace the rear wheel, which that was less than $200. And it was also quick. That was actually one of those few times in my life where good, quick, and what is it? Good, quick, and cheap. All of those things actually lined up. So I got exactly what I wanted in the time frame that I wanted, and so far so good, my dude. But yeah, the van, excuse me. The van dream that I had certainly reminded me of that aspect of van life, but 'tis neither here nor there, my dude. I sold that van for a profit, although, with all the money I put into it, not really, but yeah, sold it for $1,000 more than I bought it for, which was cool. And, that wasn't for... that wasn't me getting anything over on anyone else. I think that, honestly, in terms of the cool factor, which is the only thing that would appreciate on a purchase like that, it had gone up that amount in the time that we had the vehicle. Plus, we had some new tires on it, so that was $1,000 right there, my dude. Anyway, yesterday was basically just an exercise in relaxation. I felt tired, and I was also waiting for a letter that my parents had sent me for a new debit card, certified letter kind of thing, and I wanted to be here for that if I could help it. because, I didn't want my Airbnb host to be confused about this thing that was being delivered. I just wanted to avoid that situation. And so I just kind of hung out at the apartment for most of the day. I was doing a ton of stuff on my computer. I wish I could enumerate the things that I was doing. It was like I was like jumping between all these different tabs of like YouTube videos that I was watching and ChatGPT conversations that I was having, and then also Notebook LM things that I was playing around with. The web-based version of Notebook LM is a lot more. It has a lot more capabilities than the mobile app, and so it's fun to kind of play with that and see what they can do with these clips that are, again, it's like I'm not using Notebook LM in the way that it was intended to be used, which kind of tickles me, because it's just like, well, what can we do here that like can really take my experiences and my transcripts and things like that and make them into some sort of actionable retrospective analysis, like where are the patterns, where are the habits, where are the routines, where are the blind spots, where am I cutting my nose to spite my face, kind of a thing. I just love all that. It's very fun. It's the deep dives, every time you make one of these podcasts, at least the way that I do it, the deep dive prompt is what I typically use. And I just really, really enjoy hearing what these large language models do to, put form on this mess of expression, because I'm like, yeah, I do think that there's an underlying structure to everything. And human beings, I think that there's a bit of an irony here, because, technology has historically been this thing that is cold and mechanical and is a very separate entity from like the humanity that is the crucial catalyst for making things, I guess, but I feel like AI kind of comes full circle, especially if you find the right tools. It's just such a powerful thing. Again, it's just like, I feel like I'm just speaking out like vagaries, but it's such a big thing that it basically has applications in any and every part of human life. Like even like the way that I would typically Google things or think about how I can get information or put out information, the way that it's able to take everything in and understand it and organize it and then put more like results out for me to consider. It's just like, wow, like where would this not be helpful, And it's been fun and nice here in LA to be able to have some time to sit down and actually really play with it in a concerted way. Like I really haven't had that kind of time. When I was in Denver, I was kind of doing what I would typically do in situations where I was having downtime, which was to stay very, very active and, go for bike rides, go for long walks, and then basically come home exhausted and ready for bed. And then when I was in San Francisco, it was kind of more of the same, but with no actual base camp. So it felt a little bit more unhinged. It felt like the continuation of the recreational homelessness rather than a break from it. It was localized, localized recreational homelessness. Talk about euphemisms. George Carlin said that the more words that you use to describe something, the less likely you are to actually describe it accurately. And his example was shell shock, which used to be, I guess, what they called PTSD. And then he went through the whole evolution of shell shock to battle fatigue, and then ultimately post-traumatic stress disorder. And he's like, the humanity's been completely removed from the equation. And so contrary to his actual point, I actually really enjoy thinking about how many words I can put together to describe something that I'm feeling in a novel way. But anyway, so now here in LA, I have this computer, which is kind of like a whole new responsibility and preoccupation. It kind of feels like getting a pet or something like that. Like it needs certain types of attention. I mean, not really, but it evokes certain types of attention from me. I can just use it as a way more powerful tool than my phone, which is exactly the relationship I've always had with my computer. It's like I can do some work on my phone for sure, but I can do some real work on my computer, and especially now that I've dived even deeper into even now that I've dived it even deeper into like using these AI tools, being able to see the web app component to a lot of them, I'm like, oh, this is so much better. Like, I was experimenting with agents yesterday a little bit after watching a couple of videos because I've heard a lot about agents. They really seem extremely limited right now with what they can do, at least for my use case. So I was just like, well, I don't really care about like setting, like it's really good for business applications, the agents, like if you're trying to sell things and increase your pool of prospects. At least that's the video I watched. Maybe I should look into creative applications for agents instead of just like business ones. But, YouTube has got a certain kind of tone these days. It's like not quite the cesspool that Instagram or Facebook is, but there's certainly a huge emphasis on like, if you use this thing in a certain type of way, you could make lots of money. But that's never really appealed to me. Although I did spend a not insignificant amount of time yesterday reviewing my finances and discussing that with ChatGPT, as I've started to realize that, maybe I should be a little bit more considerate about what my next moves are going to be in terms of my pocketbook and less so about my unbounded chase for novelty, both of which can still certainly feed off of each other, moving further and further east. But yeah, I mean, at this point, reviewing everything the way that I was with ChatGPT, I was like, okay, well, I certainly have enough money to get back to Atlanta if everything remains the same and there's not too many surprises along the way. There's a nice little buffer of like what I have and what I think that it would require, especially given that I've already done this trip to the West Coast and I know approximately how much that cost. And I've also gotten the majority of the things that I think that I would need if I were to go back. I don't foresee, you can't foresee the unforeseen, but I'm not going to be buying another computer. I don't think that I would take any luxurious multi-day stays in any city. At this point, I would be content just to pass through Austin, Texas as part of the trip home. And, depending on the time of day, it would be cool to see the mothership and see if that's a comedy venue, if you don't know, if there are any performers that I especially would like to see. And again, depending on the time, maybe I could even watch a performance. And basically just continue east from there. There's a lot of states I haven't biked through before that would be interesting, like Mississippi. I biked through some portions of Alabama before, but never Louisiana, never been through there. Can't think if there's another one. I don't think that there is. I mean, Texas I've done, and that would be cool to do again. And also, Arizona and New Mexico would be very, very nice appetizers to the main course that is Texas. So I like that idea, and I certainly like the idea of getting back on the road sooner rather than later and resuming what I currently do best, thinking and biking. And the interplay between those two. I should say, I don't think I mentioned, it's raining today. And this rain was forecasted and predicted. It's moved all around within a couple of few days. I guess, again, since we are so close to the ocean and there's mountains close by as well, it's crazy the sliding scale that this storm system has taken since I started seeing it earlier in the week. Which is actually kind of crazy to think that I've been here since Monday. I'm feeling pretty good about how I've occupied my time, and I'm actually looking forward to another early night tonight if I can help it, but I'll get into my daily plans a little later. But yeah, I was curious because at a certain point, there were about 3 inches predicted over a 2-day span, Friday and Saturday. And I was like, damn, that's a lot of rain. I think I already mentioned, that's like bordering on like what my parents have recently. Hey, shout out to my parents, David and Sharon, forever anonymous, forever loved. And 3 inches over 2 days. So I looked it up this morning. So I was like, well, how much rain on average does LA get in a year? And it's 15 inches. So I'm like, wow, so that's a considerable dumping of rain that they're going to get here, compared to their yearly average. And even before doing this trip, I was trying to kind of figure out like what kind of weather should I anticipate when I get to the West Coast. And temperatures are generally more favorable, but it is like their wetter season. And so here, case in point, my dude, we got a nice downpour, which is going to be a perfect background for a long walk. So is there anything else from yesterday that I want to talk about before I move into today? Well, I guess I should mention also, so this dream I had about the van, which involved this family named the Dixons. I also got an email this morning, and this was interesting because I had completely forgotten that this even happened. And it just seems so long ago. Like, it made me want to listen to the podcast clips from that time period of me being in Denver and at the hostel that I was at there. Because there were some cool people and some good interactions, but I had forgotten about this one specific one with this guy. His English name was Dick, which I didn't ask him about, but it's an interesting one to choose considering that his Chinese name, I doubt that it means anything related to the English version or slang versions of the word Dick. But this guy named Dick, a guy from China, I was having breakfast one morning, and I had kind of also befriended this guy named Guy, who is actually the second guy named Guy who I've met on this trip. And if I ever have kids, I don't think that I'm going to name them Guy. Guy and Gal, that would be funny. It's a confusing name because it's just like, oh yeah, that guy. I say Guy way too much and way too ambiguously for that to be like a name that I'm like, oh, that's a good name. No offense to the guys out there, but for me personally, I'm just like, is that a shortening? What is? Let's see. Let's actually ask Siri. Siri, they've integrated Siri with ChatGPT on the laptops now, and so it's not a flaming garbage pit anymore. It's pretty sweet. Hey Siri. Hey Siri. Is there what is the long version of the name Guy?
Here's an answer from Wikipedia.
Abbreviated version of a Germanic name that begins with Witu, meaning wood or wit. Later became G, and then became Guido. In Latin, it was written Guido. Okay, well, that's not super helpful, so I guess there is not like a longer, more formal version of that name. Fair enough, but hey, like I'm saying, Siri has historically sucked. And it heard me say that. Yeah, it's pretty sweet to also have a ChatGPT integrated vocal thing on the computer that can, if I don't want to write something down or type it out, God forbid, I could just do an immediate search for whatever I'm looking for, which has been nice. You got to spend time with these things, these technologies, to really figure out what they can do, what they can't do, and maybe the workarounds to get between those two options. So yes, this guy Dick, he was visiting from China. He had this like phone. It was like a brand that I'd never even heard of, and it was super locked down, and everything was in Chinese. So I don't even remember how this conversation got started, but he was doing a tour of Denver, and he didn't have access to Google Maps. He couldn't get it in the App Store. He couldn't get it on the browser. And I was like, well, this seems like, another opportunity for Scientific Method to make an appearance. And so I worked with him for probably about an hour. And, he had to help me with the translations because I was like, I'm familiar with how to flow through an Android device, even if it's not in English. In terms of settings and app stores and stuff like that, because I do it so often. It's part of my digital needfuls. It is a ritual, so I can do a certain amount without needing to even know what the words say. But ultimately, I have several Gmail accounts and Google accounts that are kind of like sacrificial vessels. I'll throw files in one so I can have them live somewhere forever. I'll use another one as like a burner email address and have access to its Google Drive, so I can, I don't know. It's a lot of file management and storage. It's my version of cloud computing, And so I was able to figure out how to like sign in with one of these like accounts that I didn't care about, don't care if he ever like, took if he ever figured out how to get access to the inbox, it wouldn't bother me, or the files, it wouldn't bother me. Like, it just doesn't matter. It's totally sacrificial, as I mentioned. And so we set him up. and got him Google Maps. And so he was able to go out, and we had to do some things with translating it to English, because a big part of his system was asking people and pointing at the map, you know. And so he had very good English and was generally a very affable person, is the word that comes to mind. But yeah, he sent me a random email this morning, another dick. And he was just thanking me for helping him get the Google Maps thing. He was touring the entirety of the United States for like 3 months, and by entirety I just mean, you know, whatever portion he ended up going to. He was hitting highlights like East Coast cities, Midwest kind of area, and then like West Coast, I guess, and then flying out. And so yeah, he was here for a lot of days, and I can imagine that, you know, even with myself, like Google Maps is certainly a huge asset. And in fact, I mapped out my whole day today using Google Maps on my computer, which is like probably, I think that there are 6 or 7 distinct stops that I have today. I want to go to a dispensary, a CVS, a Starbucks, probably a Whole Foods, a Guitar Center, and an REI. So yeah, 6 steps, and then also ultimately I'm aiming for a train station as well, so that I can cut off, you know, a huge portion of having to walk back. I'll cut it by a third, my dude. We're talking 66% reduction in pedestrian woe. But yeah, it was just nice to hear from him, because again, I had forgotten about all that. And, you know, being stationary and indulging in comforts is something that I historically, especially on this trip, do not like. If anything gives birth to rumination or anything approaching boredom, it is this type of scenario specifically, especially when the comparison is like, oh, I could be on my bike, I could be in a completely different city, I could be on the road somewhere, I could be enjoying my music, and I could be riding, which it's really hard to beat. No amount of comfort really holds a candle to that, in theory. And so that's why yesterday was such a nice day for me to be like, well, you know, I enjoy hard things, and if Notebook LM is teaching me anything, it's that this relationship that I have to fatigue and just general tiredness is something to look into and something to do a little experiment on. It's like, okay, well, if I don't like being stationary, how can I flip that so that I do? You know, I'm not trying to trick myself. It's very similar to kind of like where my conversations with ChatGPT brought me to when I was buying the computer. It was like I need to hear something a certain way for me to justify what I'm going to do or what I'm doing, you know. And with the computer, again, when I heard him say, it was like, based on all the information you've given me and the conversation that we've had about how you actually want to use this device, it seems to me that if you were to buy the MacBook, you would basically be getting everything that you want for the price of a Windows computer. And I was like, that's exactly how I wanted to frame this, because, you know, there's a part of me that would love to just get the MacBook and call it a day. But in my mind, I was like, well, a MacBook is always really expensive, and I really, really don't want to pay that kind of a price for a device that, in this case too, I may not even end up using for the reason that I initially wanted to buy it. You know, again, I've been playing with that app Untold, which I recommend. If you want, it's the journal that speaks back. It's not as good as Notebook LM. I certainly would caveat that. Like, if you're looking for long form stuff, which for me, I always am. Like, some of the Notebook LM like podcasts that it will make about my clips, they're like 40 minutes long sometime, and I'm like, this is great. Like, I love this. Like, it's like the most engaging podcast I could ever imagine having access to, because it's about me. Who doesn't love that, you know? And again, I'm just so happy that I have access to all this material that I can put into it. Like, yeah, I have too much material, honestly. I have more than this thing can even handle in a given sitting. Whether it's the Book of Moron stuff or Molt or any of the other bike rides or hikes that I've done and recorded, it's just like, damn, I'm so glad I did that. Like, that was such a good idea. And I didn't even know how much it would be a benefit to my future. It was certainly, I just enjoyed purely listening back to it. But now turning it, like using it as like ammunition for self-improvement. I mean, oftentimes Notebook LM will say that, you can weaponize things, and yeah, like I'm weaponizing my past to attack my present, in a productive way. Weaponizing isn't the best way to describe it, but it's something close. I guess personal development is sort of a war. The war of being, as Tesseract said, and once cautioned America. Let's make another little cup of tea, shall we? So yeah, my dude, what else? I think I have something else on my list, but I can't really get to that right now. I only have so many hands. Let's get this thing out. Let's put this tea bag. I need to start heading on here soon, because I've got it's going to be about a 20-mile day of walking, just about. I think by the time all is said and done, it'll be easy for me to have gotten to that point. It's 15 miles just to get to the general shopping center that contains the REI and the Guitar Center and the Starbucks and the Whole Foods, and the train station is super close too. So that's going to be the bulk of the movement. And pretty recently I actually cut my leggings when I was at my family friends in Laguna Woods, which might have been a little short-sighted. That tends to happen with me. I'll think that something is a really good idea because of the present environment, and then I'll go ahead and commit to, in this case, having 2 pairs of shorts instead of 1 pair of pants and 1 pair of shorts. I still have, I cut them so that I could make leg sleeves, so that, I have found on my bike, like, especially on a sunny day, like if I started in my shorts and then you get to that point where you're basically just in the sun and it's a static source of heat and light for hours, it's like, I don't really want to stop and take my shorts off and put my pants on and, spend 10 minutes getting into a better, more appropriate outfit for the conditions. But I know for sure if I have sleeves that I will do that. So it was a strategic thing that will be very, very beneficial, but it probably would be nicer for me to have pants on a day like this. The low is like in the low 60s, so it's not going to be cold. And as long as I keep moving and keep my core warm, I'll be fine. But I certainly anticipate that today will be a day of wet feet. But hey, that's fine. Ain't nothing to it but to do it, my dude. So let me see. Do I have another thing on my list? I think I do. Nope. I don't. So let me see. Is there anything on my podcast lists? Nope. I don't. So, yeah, my dude. Yesterday was a good day. I'm very glad that I slept the way that I did. I'm going to endeavor to do that again tonight. And so I'm thinking I'll probably be out of this house for probably about, 10 hours or so. A 20-mile walk, that's certainly something. And the conditions will make it even more interesting. But, I'll enjoy it. I like, especially on a day like this where, I'm going to be going as slow as I can. The walking is the slowest way to travel. And I just enjoy being parallel to cars and just like absorbing the perceived frustration and using that for fuel for my satisfaction. Perhaps not the healthiest thing to do in terms of mental health, but, it's just like, dang, it's a nice day, even though it sucks. Like, and I'm just grateful to be out enjoying it in probably the only way that it can be enjoyed, which is, with a small umbrella, a waterproof jacket, and a good attitude. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start getting back to my needfuls. I need to do the dishes, make sure everything's in the right spot, maybe set up my coffee for tomorrow morning. Oh, I did want to say, I think caffeine is crazy. I think yesterday, in addition to just being generally tired, I think I was overly caffeinated. I didn't have any decaf, and so I was just drinking like caffeinated coffee. And damn, dude, if you start your day with that huge rush of caffeine, I just think you're setting yourself up for a certain kind of failure, because it takes a really long time, maybe even impossible to reset until a full night's sleep. So I'm basically just like microdosing caffeine. I bought some decaf yesterday, And for me, it's a 3-to-1 ratio, like 3 scoops of decaf, 1 scoop of calf, and you can kind of just chill on that all day. Like, it's never too much, you know. So 9:30, it's time to go. Time to get my life together. Time to hit the road. Wish me luck. I wish you luck. Let's everyone have a good time. Have a good day. It's freaking fantastic. Love you. Bye.